Let's talk about the state of Tibetan language and education rights under China's President Xi Jinping. Education and language have become primary targets under President Xi Jinping's Sinicization project, which aims to homogenize all minority nationalities, including Tibetans, into the dominant Chinese fold in the People's Republic of China. Anything that sparks and strengthens ethnic cultural consciousness is treated as a security threat to the party state. Chinese policies and campaigns implemented since 2012 have systematically undermined and marginalized native languages and cultures of minority nationalities. The so-called bilingual education policy, ostensibly promoted to unite non-Chinese nationalities throughout the PRC, drastically limits the use of Tibetan language in the education system, both secular and monastic, and directly impacts the survival of Tibetan linguistic and cultural identity. A forced cultural assimilation policy is being carried out in the garb of ethnic policy in the new era, with devastating consequences on education and language rights in Tibet.
除了我爷爷之外，我们家里人基本上不会说藏文。
Children and young people have become primary targets under Xi Jinping's campaign to build, quote-unquote, a modern education system in which Putonghua, Mandarin Chinese based on Beijing dialect, enjoys a higher status and power than minority languages, violating constitutional guarantees for regional autonomy and the principle of equality and non-discrimination. Non-governmental initiatives to promote Tibetan language and culture have been suppressed, and individuals advocating for Tibetan language and cultural education have been detained and tortured. Private educational institutions, including those previously approved by the party state, are being closed down, while monastic institutions are forced to prioritize Putonghua teaching and propagation. Since 2012, private Tibetan schools and winter schools offering Tibetan language and culture classes to children during winter vacations have come under increased attack. A dozen known Tibetan private schools have been ordered to close and students to be enrolled in government-run schools. The last avenues for teaching Tibetan language and history to young Tibetans are now being closed. In May last year, the party and the People's Government at the county level publicly announced the closure of Sengduk Takse School in Darla County in Golok Tibetan Autonomous Prefecture. The school was started to educate the orphans and children from poor families in and around Darlak. The school had about 40 teachers at its closure, and the teachers were handed written instructions and threatened with life imprisonment if they shared the document with anyone. Chinese laws and policies are incapable of protecting the right to use minority languages because they are part of a wider nation-building strategy geared towards creating a Tongwa Minzu identity with a single language and identification with the Chinese nation-state. The situation is aggravated by the criminalization of peaceful dissent and an absolute lack of domestic judicial recourse against state excesses. A critical analysis of relevant Chinese legal provisions on education and language demonstrates that the Chinese constitution and the associated legislation lack clarity and contradict Tibetan education and language rights. The right to education is a basic human right that is indispensable for realizing other human rights and is guaranteed in numerous international treaties and conventions. So what should the Chinese government do? The Chinese authorities must conduct a thorough and a transparent review of current laws and policies on education and language rights. They need to promptly revise or abrogate vaguely defined provisions commonly used to perpetuate the dominance of Chinese medium education and silence critical voices. The Chinese legal system must adopt and implement a human rights-based approach in its legal and policy-making process to ensure the fulfillment of all human rights, including education, language, religion, and culture in Tibet and elsewhere in the PRC.